What is up, ladies and gentlemen? We are back once again with another video here at Outlaws. Finally made it back to our usual pre-session recording spot. Been a while since we've had one of these, to get you guys up to speed as far as where we're at on the poker, the vlog, life in general, moving forward, where we're going. The new workflow is absolutely awesome. Loving what we're doing with the editor now, giving us a little bit more free time to get caught up, get some old videos out. The new template is fantastic. Love the production quality of the vlog and the direction we're going, and like having a little bit of extra free time. After we get caught up, we're gonna try to squeeze in some more sessions finally. I know we've been talking about it for months now, but the amount of work that we were just doing, it was hard to get more than one session in a week. In fact, it was getting to a point where it was hard to even get one session in a week, and I was just too exhausted to even want to play half of the time. Those times are behind us. We're getting enough sleep, we're getting caught up on our workload. And when I'm playing, I feel like we're doing okay as far as, you know, being well rested and all those things. As far as the run bad streak, fingers crossed, knock on wood, I think we finally broke it. Well, I know we broke it because we had two pretty decent sessions that we got in. Finally, some wins that were more than $300-$400. If you guys haven't seen those, go check out the most recent videos. Anyhow, feel really good. I think Vegas helped us a lot. Hopefully the Vegas videos are out so you know what I'm talking about. But overall, TLDR, we did pretty good out there. Nothing crazy, but enough to restore our confidence and get our game back in the right direction. We're feeling good, feeling confident, playing things the way we should be, not over folding, not over calling. Let's hope we keep this going. We're definitely gonna try to get some bluffs through. It's not like we're gonna play like total nits, but we don't wanna be suicidal with it either. Anyhow, that's enough yapping. Time to get back into the game. See you guys on the felt. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we start off exchanging some money for chips here from the cage. We end up buying $900. We aren't going to be in for the full 900 right off the rip, only starting off with the 300, which is the cap at the start of the game. Hopefully we won't have to dip into the chips sitting next to us, but it's nice to have them just in case we need them. Starting off with a $100 capped PLO Bomb Pot here. Going through this one quickly as there isn't too much strategy to break down here. We look down at King, King, Jack, 8 and end up flopping top full house, only losing 2 pocket 8s here. We have our opponents leading into us. We call down 2 streets. We get to the river, show our hand. No one has pocket 8s, so we are good. Always nice to start off with a win. Alrighty, ladies and gents, for this first hand, we are 6-handed. It is a 1-3-10. The button straddle is on for $10. There's a call from under the gun, and when the action gets over to us in the hijack, I look down at 2 jacks with about 535 in our stack. I decided to bump up the price of poker to $30. Cutoff gets out of the way, the button calls, the 2 blinds get out of the way, and under the gun calls as well. So we are going 3 ways to this flop. $96 in the middle, and the board runs out 7-9 for all diamonds. The action checks over to us, and all in all, this is a pretty decent board for us. We have an overpair to the board, and we also have a jack high flush draw. So I decided to continue betting here for $55. It doesn't take too long for the button to put in the call, but under the gun gets out of the way. 206 in the middle, and we go to the turn, which comes the ace of clubs. Not the card we were looking for, but we can't give up on this hand just yet. However, I am going to proceed with caution, so I decide to check it over to our opponent here, and to my surprise, he ends up checking it back. If he had a flush or somehow hit this ace here, definitely expect to see a bet. So after he checks back this turn, I think our hand is going to be good here a lot of the time, especially when we see the 4 of spades hit the river. I highly doubt this card improved our opponent's hand. Now the question is, do we want to bet or check here? I honestly feel like either option is okay, but I decide to play it safe this time and just check it to our opponent. He ends up going all in for $140, which I don't love to see, obviously. But when I start thinking the hand over and go through the action in my head, I don't think he would have flopped a flush and played it this way. He could just have a king or queen of diamonds in his hand that bricked out and he's trying to steal this pot. He could also have a hand like 5-6 suited or 8-10 suited that was open-ended and bricked out as well. He could have also just floated us on the flop with the ace of diamonds in his hand and then turned top pair. But outside of that, I don't think there's very many ace highs that are going to float us. And if I know Eric, I know he is a very capable opponent who will sniff out weakness and steal a pot whenever he sees the opportunity. So given the amount of hands that we are ahead of versus behind, and the fact that our opponent is capable, I did decide to throw in the call this time. And we were right. Our opponent had 7-5 of spades for middle pair. And with that, we are off to a fantastic start to this session. Let's see if we can keep the run good going. And ladies and gentlemen, this hand is just a testament to the action caused by the Nit Game. We see an under the gun open to $25, a re-raise by the cutoff to $75. Action folds back over to the cutoff, who no longer likes his hand anywhere near as much, and then this happens.
Nice hand.
King on the flop.
God, I'm such a pussy.
Man, I love the Nit Game. If you haven't tried it, I definitely recommend playing it. Alrighty, for this next hand, it is 1-3, no straddle, and we are indeed 7-handed. We see an open by under the gun to $10. Folds over to the hijack, who calls the 10. I'm in the cutoff with king of spades, 10 of diamonds, about $7.50 in our stack, and I decide to bump up the price of poker to $40. Getting a bit out of line here, but we have our nit button that we need to get rid of, so aggression favors the bold. The button folds, the small blind folds, big blind folds, under the gun calls, and hijack calls as well. Not really ideal. I would have preferred to take this heads up, but we are where we are. $124 in the middle, and the flop comes out ace of clubs, ace of hearts, 4 of hearts. So we don't really have much to go with here on this board, but when the action checks over to us, we're definitely going to continue here. With 2 aces on the board, it's not very likely that either one of our opponents is holding one. So I decide to continue here for $45. Under the gun calls and the hijack folds. We're off to the turn with 214 in the middle, and it comes the king of diamonds. I haven't played with this particular villain too much, so I'm not sure what his playstyle is. He seems to be a little bit on the tighter side, so I'm assuming he has either one of 2 hands here. He's either holding an ace and is never folding, or he's on the flush draw. If he does have an ace, I'm not sure why he hasn't taken the betting lead himself. Potentially just going into check call mode in case he has ace rag and he thinks he's out kicked. And obviously if he's on the flush draw, he's just going to try and hit it instead of betting himself. So I decide to bet $60 here, keeping it relatively small, extracting a little bit more value out of the flush draw. But if he does have an ace, we aren't shooting ourselves in the foot too bad here. He does put in the call one more time, and we go to the river, which is absolutely atrocious. It is the 6 of hearts. So now we are not beating either of the hands that we put our opponent on. He checks it over to me, and there's absolutely no point in me betting here. So I go ahead and check it back, and I'm very shocked to see that our opponent had ace queen of spades. There was absolutely no way I put him on a hand that strong, to be honest, with the way this played out. Not sure what he was afraid of, but it does seem like this particular individual is on the tighter side. So we'll keep that in mind moving forward to later hands. All right, for this next one, we finally have a full ring going now that everybody is settled in. Fortunately, we took a spanking trying to see a couple flops, some hands, so our stack is now down to 437. We see a limp from under the gun for $3, under the gun plus 1 fold. I'm in the hijack with queen of clubs, 5 of spades. Nobody's shown interest in this pot just yet, and I need to get rid of my nit button, so I decide to make it $10 to go. The low jack then raises us to $45. And to my surprise, the hijack calls, the button calls, the small blind calls. The big blind does get out of the way and under the gun. So when the action is back over to me, we are getting a fantastic price to call here, even though our hand is absolute garbage. And we really need to get rid of this nit button. So we put in the call here and go 5 ways to this flop. 229 in the middle, and the board runs out 5, 7, 9 with 2 clubs. We have bottom pair and a backdoor flush draw. Not bad, but not good enough to lead out into this many people. So when the action checks over to me, I go ahead and just check this back. And to my surprise, the action checks through. Off to the turn, which brings us the deuce of clubs. Now, not only do we have a pair, but we also have a queen high flush draw. And the action checks over to me, and I do consider betting for a moment, but I get much more devious intentions and decide to check this instead. The original pre-flop aggressor, Mr. Connie, to my left over here, takes the bait and decides to bet $125. The action folds over to me, and considering that he checked the flop and this deuce doesn't really change too much on the turn, I don't really think he has much here. If he had an overpair or ace king, I expected him to c-bet the flop, but considering he just checked it through, I'm thinking he most likely has two broadways, with one of them being a club, which means our flush draw may not be good, but if that is the case, our pair of fives most likely is. And if he does happen to have a piece of this board, it means our pair is probably no good, but our flush draw most likely is. But with that in mind, I do want to give myself a third option, which is to just take this pot down now. So I decide to stick it all in here, hoping that the pressure will be enough to get our opponent off of the hand. But unfortunately, it doesn't take too long for Connie to put in the call. We go off to the river with 1013 in the middle, and the river comes the ace of diamonds. I don't think our pair of fives is good here, so I announce that I miss. Connie flips over to jacks with the jack of clubs. Definitely wasn't putting him on an overpair considering how the action went on the flop, but his call makes sense. He had an overpair and a jack high flush redraw. Nice hand to you, sir. And now that we punted off our first bullet, it was time for us to reload, and I decided to add on for 600. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, we did end up losing the Nit Game regardless of our attempts to get rid of our button, so we have to pay the $100 tax as a splash pot. And now we just gotta pray that we wake up with a good hand to try and make our money back. We're under the gun and we look down at 3 of hearts, 3 of spades. Pretty solid hand, but not the best hand to just open because any board is scary for a pair as little as 3s. So I decide to limp in here with the plan to call a bet and hopefully drill a set on the flop. Under the gun limps as well, and when the action gets to the low jack, he decides to go all in for $462. The action folds over to me, and at this point, I really don't think that our opponent has a big pair. If he did have a big pair, he probably would have just raised to a normal opening size to go for some value. So I'm putting him on a hand like ace jack, ace queen, or ace king. He is going to have some pocket pairs in his range at some frequency, but I've seen him shove pre-flop about 3 or 4 times now, and we haven't been playing the Nit Game for very long, so I really think this is 2 Broadway cards. Anyhow, we snap this off here, assuming that our hand is good. Under the gun +1 gets out of the way. Running it twice with my boy Eric con queso. And I'm glad we did because we immediately see an ace in the window followed by a queen. So we went from being slightly ahead to being a dog and needing to hit a 3. The turn and river are no improvement on board 1. And as we go to board 2, we see yet another ace. On this ace king 9 board, the 5 of clubs and 6 of spades are not the cards we needed to improve. So sadly for us, but luckily for my boy Eric, he is scooping this pot. And after that, unfortunately, we had to add on for some more chips because you can't play poker without poker chips. So we added on an additional $800. This is going to be it for us for the rest of the night. So we really need to make this one count. After that last rebuy, our stack was uptrending a little bit. Nothing too interesting to show you guys, just a couple small pots. So we're right around 10,010 for this one. There was a $10 straddle on for this one, a couple of limpers. I'm in the hijack with king, queen offsuit. Good enough to bump this up with the nit button. Made it $60, got a couple callers. We went to a flop of 5 ace 6 rainbow. Ace high board, pretty good for my continuing range, so we put in a hefty bet of 150. Somehow got it through, showed everybody the bluff, got rid of our nit button, and our stack continued to uptrend. Alrighty, the $10 straddle is on for this hand as well. We see a limp to 10 by under the gun +1 limps as well. Folds over to me in the cutoff, and I look down at an absolute premium ace 10 of spades with about $11.90 in our stack. I decided to put in a small raise here to $40. Normally I'd go a bit bigger here to try and thin out the field, but the table has been very 3-bet happy lately, so I didn't want to put in a $60 to $80 bet and then get raised to 200 and be put in a tough spot. I'm okay with $40, and if we let some extra players in, so be it. Our hand can make the nut straight and nut flush, so it doesn't need a whole lot of protection. The button and small blind get out of the way, but Eric Americano says $40 is no bueno here. He makes it $95 to go. McFaddy's under the gun and thinks this number is a good price as well. He comes along for the ride, and obviously closing the action here, we are going nowhere with our suited ace. We have a pretty substantial pot going already. 306 in the middle, and the flop comes 755 spade club heart. And to my surprise, the big blind slows down and checks it here. McFaddy checks it as well. And when the action is over on me, I would expect any big pair or ace king to see bet on this flop, but since neither opponent did, I'm thinking that we could have the best hand here, so I decide to fire out for $125. Eric puts in the call, but Fadi gets out of the way. Going heads up to this turn with 556 in the middle, and it comes a beautiful 4 of spades. Eric checks it over to me once again, and now not only do we have 2 overs, but we have the nut flush draw on top of it. Considering the pre-flop action, I don't expect this card to have helped our opponent in any way, shape, or form. I decide to continue here for a hefty sizing. I make it 325 to go. It's back on Eric, and after a bit of deliberation, he decides to stick it all in, which I was not expecting, but his all in is not much more than the bet I already have out there. His all in was for 503, which means if we put in the call here, it's going to cost us 178 more to make $1,562. Well, all we have is 2 overs and the nut flush draw, but the pot odds we are getting are absolutely insane, so there's no way I can ever fold here. I do stake in the call. The river comes a total brick. It is the 3 of diamonds, so we are left with nothing but ace high, and that's when our opponent shows king queen offsuit. So ace high is actually gonna be good here. Wow, I was not expecting to see that. I didn't really even consider what our opponent had and what he was jamming with on the turn, to be 100% honest. The price we were getting was just way too ridiculous, but it's absolutely crazy that we took this down with just ace high here. Not expected, but it's very welcome. And after that hand, we were left with a plethora of $5 chips. So after stacking them up, we had the best in the West, Mr. Kev Dog, come over and personally rack these up for us for a color up, and we exchanged those for 5 $100 black chips. Let the poker continue. Alrighty, for this next one, there is a $100 splash pot in the middle up for grabs. Luckily, not paid by us this time. So getting into the action, under the gun +1 limps, the low jack limps, the high jack limps, the button limps, and when it gets over to the small blind, he goes for a bit of a squeeze play here and decides to raise it up to $50. I look down at jack 10 offsuit, and while this isn't a great hand, we do have position on the initial raiser. Everybody else just limped for 3, so I can't imagine their hands are that strong. And with the extra $100 in the middle as incentive, I think we're getting pretty good pot odds here to put in the call, so I do decide to call. Under the gun +1 gets out of the way. The low jack calls, the high jack folds, and the button calls. So we are going to go 4 ways to this flop here. 306 in the middle, and the board runs out 4-5 king with 2 diamonds. And to my surprise, Jensen decides to check here. You might be getting a bit tricky here with ace king, considering there's 2 low cards on the board, but with the 2 diamonds out there, you'd think he'd want to protect it a little bit. Either way, we have 2 players behind, so when the action checks to me, I don't think we can take a stab at this, so I go ahead and check it back. And then we have McFaddy and Super Mario also putting in the check. Going off to this turn, which brings us the 10 of clubs. And now Jensen all of a sudden decides he has a hand, and he leads out here for $160. He could be trapping, but I'm not entirely sure that he has a hand just quite yet. He could just have 2 broadways with a hand like ace queen or ace jack, which just turned a gutter ball, or he could have a hand like pocket 8s or pocket 9s. Saw a king high board, decided to slow it down, but since nobody took interest in the flop, he is now taking the betting lead himself. Either way, we turn to pair with a reasonable kicker, so I'm going to go ahead and put in the call on this one street and see what he decides to do on the river. McFaddy and Super Mario get out of the way, so they leave me one-on-one with Jensen over here. 626 in the middle, and the Queen of Spades peels off. Jensen now decides to size up significantly. He decides to bet 425, and we go into the tank. Very tough spot for us now. Our single pair has completely shriveled up, but with this bet sizing, Jensen is basically saying he has a monster or absolutely nothing. So our pair of tens is either really good or really not. And when I go over this decision in my head, knowing Jensen and the way he likes to play, it's very possible for him to check top back on the flop, hoping somebody takes a stab at it so he could go for the check raise. While we are holding a blocker, it's very possible to be playing a hand like pocket tens this way. And I know that he's more than capable of bluffing into multiple opponents with a hand just like a gut shot when other players show weakness. Very unlikely that he has a straight here, but man, I've seen him do it in the past, so can't put that out of the equation just quite yet. Anyhow, when I go over the amount of bluffs that he has in this spot versus the amount of value hands, I just don't think there are very many bluffs. I don't want to mess around and find out and call off half of my stack here. I'm just going to let it go and try to find a better spot later tonight. If you bluffed me, you bluffed me, Jensen. Nice hand, my man. Nice hand. Alrighty, so our stack has taken a bit of a beating and we are around 1350 now. I am in the cutoff for this button and we see an under the gun limp to 3, under the gun +1 bets 30. Action folds over to me and we decide to call the 30 here with Jack 10 offsuit. I would prefer if it were suited, but in position, offsuit I think is okay every now and again. The small blind calls, the big blind calls, and under the gun calls as well. So we are going 5 ways to this flop. 150 in the middle, and the board runs out Jack, Deuce, 9, Heart, Diamond, Spade. The action checks over to the pre-flop aggressor and he decides to continue for $50 here. We have top pair, so we're going to float him one more time to see what develops on the turn. Everybody else gets out of the way, so we are going heads up to the turn. 250 in the middle, and it brings us the 3 of hearts. Relatively safe card for us. We still have top pair with a reasonable kicker, and at this point, under the gun +1 decides to continue betting for $50. Now, this bet sizing seems a bit weak. This bet sizing on the turn is feeling much more like a stab than a value bet in my opinion. Putting him on something like ace king, I don't really see that many draws available for him on this board unless he somehow turned a flush draw. He's a bit on the tighter side, so I highly doubt he's making this move with a hand like queen 10, especially from the position he's in. If he had an overpair, I would have expected him to size up on the turn here. So I want to find out here and now if our opponent does have a hand. I decide to re-raise him to $175. This should be a big enough sizing that if he has air, he'll just go ahead and release now. But unfortunately, he puts the call in pretty quickly. So I think we're in trouble. $600 in the middle as we go to this river, which brings the innocuous 5 of diamonds. Flush draw bricks out, straight draw bricks out. At this point, I'm thinking our opponent most likely has ace jack and we're never going to get him to fold that on this board. So I decide to just check this back and our opponent flips over pocket queens. Wasn't expecting that. Super small bet on the turn was, I don't know, very confusing for pocket queens in my opinion. I don't think I would have played it that way, but to each their own. You got the maximum out of me, so obviously it worked. Moving on to the next one. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have transitioned to the small blind game, which is why the button is in the cup and you see money piling in it. That is not a straddle. That is a separate side game. We are in the small blind, so there's only $10 for us to win in this hand, so we don't want to get too crazy. We see a limp from the low jack, a raise to 15 from the cutoff. The action is back at me, and would you look at that? We look down at Jack 10 offsuit. I swear this has been the only playable hand we've had in the last hour and a half to 2 hours. This didn't just happen back to back to back. And when you're card dead, anything looks playable. So we come along for the ride. Big blind gets out of the way, so we're going 3 ways to this flop. $48 in the middle, and we go to this board, which comes 9, 8, king, club, heart, diamond. All things considered, this is a pretty good flop for us. We are open-ended and have clean outs because there is no flush draw on the board. I check, the low jack checks, and then the cutoff decides to continue here for $15. Obviously not going anywhere with our open-ended straight draw, so we put in the call, and the low jack comes along as well. 93 in the middle as we go to this turn, which brings us the 6 of spades. Didn't improve our hand whatsoever, so obviously we are going to put in the check here. The low jack puts in the check as well, and the cutoff now decides to size up to a whopping $55. About a half pot size bet here. Once again, we can't really go anywhere with our open enders, so I decide to put in the call, and to my surprise, the low jack decides to wake up Mr. McFaddy over there. He bumps it up to a whopping $350, and to make things even more surprising, the cutoff now goes all in for $931. What the heck, man? This thing got out of hand real fast. Action's back onto me, and it's really not much of a decision. This is way too much money to go all in here with just the draw, even if it is a draw to the nuts. I'm just gonna make peace with the fact that we lost $85 and watch the fireworks go off. They decide to run it twice, and the first river is the deuce of clubs. The second river is the ace of spades. Fadi shows the nuts straight, and Super Mario flopped a set of 8s. Mad undecent for my boy over here, but what you gonna do? That's poker. All right, let's jump into the next hand. Alrighty guys, this next hand was a pretty fun one to play at the time. Action folds over to me in the low jack, and we look down at ace of spades, 10 of spades with about 857 in our stack. I decide to open the action to $30. Folds over to the button, who decides to bump it up to 60. The small blind puts in the call, and for a min raise, I'm not taking this as a major sign of strength, more of a sign of squeezing to get the blinds out of the way and have less players involved to get it heads up. Not that I'm ever folding ace 10 suited in this spot, but just wanted to note that down before continuing. Small blind puts in the call, so we're going 3 ways to this flop. 183 in the middle, and the board runs out an absolute terror. 10, 6, king with 3 hearts. Small blind checks, I check, and to my surprise, the button checks this back pretty quickly. The turn brings us an irrelevant 8 of spades. I guess there's some potential straight draws out there now, but on this monotone board, that is the least of our concern. McFaddy checks it over to us once again, and at this point, I think second pair top kicker is most likely the best hand. Pretty sure a king would have bet the flop, a flush definitely would have bet the flop, and any queen or ace of hearts would also take a stab at the flop as well. So keeping all that in mind, I do decide to bet here. I end up throwing out an absolutely mediocre bet sizing though. I throw out $25. Not sure what I was thinking, but Mr. Eric must have taken our absolutely ridiculous bet as a sign of major weakness, because he instantly 3-bets us once again to $75. Fadi gets out of the way. I'm not buying that he has any piece of this, so I very quickly put in the call. We go heads up to the river, which brings us the 4 of spades. Once again, doesn't affect this board. No reason to bet here. I'm going to go ahead and check it over to Mr. Americano. He very quickly bets 175, and we waste 0 time in throwing in the call. We wait for our opponent to show the goods, and my lord, does he have the goods. He flopped the second nuts and took us to Value Town with his Queen 7 suited. Oh wait, those are clubs, not hearts. Really happy with how we played this hand. It was just one of those moments where my gut was telling me something was up. Didn't believe our opponent for a second. Went with our read and took it all the way down to the river with 0 hesitation, and we turned out to be right this time. I feel like these moments are the ones that get you hooked on poker and keep us coming back to the felt. All right, that's enough of that. Let's go on to the next one. All right, ladies and gentlemen, after that last hand, we went pretty card dead for, I kid you not, about 3 hours. We played a couple small pots and our stack went up and down a little bit. Ended up getting back to over the 800 we rebought in for, so we're sitting at around $980. Nothing too eventful to show you, but this one's a good one. We see a limp from the hijack for 3, button limps for 3, small blind limps for 3, and then I look down at 2 red aces in the big blind. Definitely need to put in a raise here and don't want to make it too cheap, but considering everybody just limped in for 3, I don't want to go too big either because I don't think they have that great of hands. I decided to raise it up to $25, hoping to get 1, maybe 2 callers at most. Hijack calls, the button folds, small blind folds. We are going heads up to this flop, $56 in the middle, and we get a flop of jack 3, 10 with 2 hearts. The board's pretty wet, so I do think we can continue betting here for a reasonable size. I decide to make it $53 to go. Mr. McFaddy in the hijack puts in the call. 126 to the turn, which comes the 8 of diamonds. No need to take our foot off the gas. I continue firing here for $75. Thinks it over for a small moment, but puts in the call. The pot's getting pretty decent. 276 in the middle, hoping to get a clean river to continue betting on, and we unfortunately do not get that. We get the 7 of clubs. A lot of 2 pairs get there. There's obviously a 4 liner to a straight. Any 9 makes a straight here. I'm not really sure if we're going to get called by worse if we bet on this river, so I do decide to just check this back. McFaddy flips up one of his cards and shows that he has a pair of 8s. I show that we have our pair of aces. He ends up mucking before I catch a glimpse of the second card. Not quite sure what it was, but don't really care. We have the winner. We're scooping the pot, so no reason to pry into it. Nothing too crazy going on in this hand, but it did affect our stack size, which comes into play in the next one. Alrighty, so we've slowly built up our stack to around 1350. The Nit Game is back on for this hand. It is a standard 1-3, no straddle. Under the gun limps, the hijack limps, and when the action is back on me in the cutoff, I decide to make it $50 to go, hoping to get 1 caller max here. We need to get rid of our Nit button, and ace-8 suited is pretty strong heads up. Luckily, the button, the small, the big blind all fold. Under the gun does put in the call, and the hijack folds, so desired outcome has been met. We're going heads up with MMA. Now you might think that stands for mixed martial arts, but it actually stands for make money automatically, and you'll see why in just a moment. 106 in the middle, and the flop comes out deuce, queen, ace with 2 diamonds. Under the gun checks, action's back on me, and I decide to continue here for $50. We flop top pair with a reasonable kicker. Doubt our opponent has an ace after he just limped in for 3. He does put in the call, so immediately we have some alarm bells going off. I'm putting our opponent on either a weaker ace, a queen, or a diamond draw. 206 in the middle, and the turn comes the 8 of hearts. Checks it over to us once again. Time to size up here and figure out where we're at. I decide to continue with $125. Our opponent doesn't take very long before putting in the call once again. 456, and the river comes the 3 of clubs. Our opponent all of a sudden decides that he has a monster and decides to jam his remaining 303. And now I am in a pickle. The 8 of hearts and the 3 of clubs changed absolutely nothing in my opinion, at least for our opponent's hand. But the turn did give us 2 pair. I know this particular individual likes to play very wide and plays a lot of weird hands, so I wouldn't put it past him to show up with a queen deuce or a queen 3 here, which we have totally dominated. I don't think he would have called down with pocket 3s and river to set. He definitely doesn't have pocket aces or pocket queens. Could potentially have pocket deuces, but I would have expected him to raise us either on the flop or turn if he did. And even though he does play kind of wild sometimes, I highly doubt he had 4-5 unless it was specifically 4-5 of diamonds. I think I took a little too long with this decision here. When you have a hand as strong as 2 pair versus this particular player type, it's a snap call in my opinion. I think I was just really tired because it was past midnight at this point, but eventually I did realize that I can absolutely never fold this hand in this spot here, so we did put in the call, and our opponent shows queen 9 offsuit. Huh? See what I mean? My friend over here likes to play some crazy hands, and he ripped it into us with second pair shit kicker. I think this was a bit of an accidental slow roll though, so I felt a little bad about it, but it wasn't intentional, so hopefully the table gets over it. Moving on to the next one. Alrighty, we now have a good stack of chips to do some damage with. Sitting on about 1875, we see a limp from under the gun. Under the gun plus 1 limps as well. The low jack limps, and when we get to the cutoff, he decides to increase the price of poker to $35. I'm on the button with ace 7 suited. Definitely cannot be folding for this price here with this stack depth. I put in the call, hoping that nobody rebumps it behind us, but considering everybody limped, as long as we get through the blinds, we should be safe. Small blind folds, the big blinds folds, which is great news. Under the gun folds, and then under the gun plus 1 calls, along with the low jack. 114 in the middle, and we go to this flop, which comes 5, 4, 6 rainbow. Action goes check, check. Cutoff now continues betting for a whopping $110. And now the action is on me, and we have a decision to make. Really wishing we would have seen 2 spades along with this flop, and then it would be no decision at all. But But Jensen is firing pretty big here, saying he has a very good hand, obviously, with his pre-flop action and then firing big on this flop. I'm expecting him to have an overpair here, or potentially even a set, to be honest. I've seen him blast this big with a hand like pocket fives in the past before, so I wouldn't be surprised if he flopped a set. The Nit Game is on, so seeing an open to that size pre-flop would not surprise me, but he could just have queens or kings here as well. Considering that there's no other flush draws available, our outs for the open ender are clean and we are getting the right price. So I think it's worth calling on the flop, but I do have to keep in mind that this is Jensen, and if you bet pot on the flop, that means his turn bet is going to be sizable as well. So there's a small chance that we call this flop and might have to fold on the turn depending on what the bet sizing is. But for now, let's just go ahead and put in the call and see what transcribes. McFaddy releases his hand and says he's had enough, but Make Money automatically says he's going nowhere and puts in the call as well. 444 now in the middle, and we go to the turn, which comes the King of Hearts, not improving our hand whatsoever, potentially improving Jensen's hand here now to top set, depending on his holdings based off of what we thought he had. MMA decides to check it. Now Jensen continues betting for $350. It was what I was expecting, but not what I wanted to see. Now that we are on the turn, the amount of outs we have has decreased. I'm assuming that MMA behind us, if he called the flop, is going to call this turn too. I don't expect him to ever release here. So as far as pot odds are concerned, I feel that we are going to get the right price if he calls, but if he doesn't, then unfortunately it is not the right price. So I go back and forth in my head deliberating as to whether or not we should stick the chips in here, and ultimately I decide that I'm going to be playing the math and the pot odds. MMA's money is not in the pot currently, so I cannot make the call here because we are not getting the right price. So I do elect to fold here, and unfortunately, after he thinks his decision over for quite some time as well, he does inevitably put the chips in, which I hate to see. Now bringing this pot up to 1144. Luckily, our pity party does not last long because the river brings the Jack of Diamonds. MMA checks, Jensen jams, covering MMA for 351, and after tanking for what felt like an eternity, eventually MMA does put in the call, now bringing the pot up to 1846, and Jensen, the cheeky little SOB, shows pocket sixes. He saw a bunch of limpers pre-flop and made an open trying to get rid of his nit button. Absolutely smashed the flop to get max value from MMA. He almost got us and took us to Value Town as well, but luckily for us, we weren't getting the right pot odds. Ended up letting it go and breaking out. Otherwise, we may have been the one on the other end of this. Alrighty, and for the last hand of the night, it is the absolute showstopper. Starting this off with a $100 splash pot in the middle for the nit tax, since we just finished that last round, was luckily not paid by yours truly. Let's jump into the hand. So we see a limp by Under the Gun. The action is now over to me and Under the Gun +1. I look down at ace-6 suited. For the most part tonight, everybody's been playing the splash pots pretty straight up. We haven't seen any massive over jabs on them. It's typically what happens by the end of the night when we are all very deep. When you only have 200 or 300 in front of you, it's very easy to jam all in to try and get the additional $100 since it's a very small percent of your stack. But when you're sitting on a couple thousand, not really worth putting all your stack in to make the additional 100. Anyhow, that being said, we look down at ace-6 of clubs. I've been playing pretty snug and straight up for the entire night, so I think with this particular hand, it is just about good enough for us to put in a reasonable raise, trying to thin out the field here. This should look pretty strong since we're opening in such early position. Works out reasonably well. It folds over to the button where McFaddy puts in the call for 30. MMA calls out of the small blind. Ron Swanson in the big blind puts in the call. Jensen Under the Gun calls as well. $280 in the middle, and we go to a flop of 4-5 ace rainbow. With this many players involved, I am concerned that somebody might be in here with an ace, but after the action checks over to me, I'm thinking our top pair might be good. So I decide to continue here for $100. Fadi gets out of the way, MMA calls, Ron Swanson gets out of the way, and Jensen gets out of the way. $480 in the middle, and the turn comes a beautiful ace of spades. Another ace hitting the board makes it even less likely that our opponent has an ace, and considering we are going up against MMA, he plays a very wide range. Could have an ace here to some frequency, but I think he's going to have a lot of 5x, 4x in his range. even some straight draw possibilities. So when this card peels off, I'm sitting here trying to figure out how we're going to get all the money in the middle. And when I look over at him, it looks like he's grabbing all his chips and getting them ready for an all-in. And ladies and gentlemen, he does in fact slide everything into the middle. Not much of a decision here. I snap this off. Our opponent flips over his hand and shows 9-5 of spades. We flip over ours, and obviously chips are good here. Opponent's drawing dead, and the river comes absolute overkill. It is the ace of hearts. And with that, we are scooping this $1,900 pot. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are closing out the session. We got a couple quick photos of the stack for the thumbnail. And with that, my friends, that brings our session to a close. So let's go over the session stats. Our first buy-in was for $300, which obviously didn't last long, so we had to rebuy for $600. Unfortunately, lost that one too, which brought us to our third buy-in, which was $800. Some tip and food were involved, but they come out of the stack, so we won't go over those numbers. Our cash out was for a total of $3,050, which brings the total profit to $1,350. Not a bad day if I do say so myself. Played this session for 8 hours and 27 minutes. Considering the profit mentioned above, that's good for an hourly big blind rate of 49 big blinds an hour. And money wise, it's $159 per hour. Pretty solid session overall. We are definitely uptrending as of late, which is great after the horrid run we had for a while. So it is much needed. All right, guys, that's all I have for you. Thank you so much for stopping by. Appreciate the love and support as per usual. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you're not following on Instagram yet, look us up at Monte Poker. Links in the description below. We have a TikTok channel dropping soon, but for now, it's just IG and YouTube. Hopefully by the next video, I'll have that channel set up and going as well. All right, thank you once again. Good luck on the felt, and I'll see you all next time.